I'm going to skip all the introductions and pleasantries, and I'll just dive right in. I want to
Sounds
talk
good.
about channels first. So channels have been quite successful in the past 2 months, as we have all seen. So can you talk a bit more about your latest thinking on the overall channel strategy, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So we shared a little bit of this on the dev call last week, but happy to kind of
Yeah.
recap and just any of the thinking that's changed since. But at a high level, I think channels has been working. It was kind of our first big product feature bet in Warpcast in a while. Basically, since we added NFTs, like I think a lot of what we have been working on in Warpcast was just like your standard set of kind of like getting to parity with Twitter, and we're not even at parity with Twitter, when video classic. But basically, we took a bet on channels with Farcon and Purple in June. Things worked well. We increased the number of channels, and we've seen a material increase in the number of casts on the network without actually adding that many users to the network. So it was like a 50% month over month increase in the first month after we really rolled out channels. And so we've been really trying to kind of figure out how to make this work. And so for the last 6 weeks, we've been spending maybe a little bit more time than we wanted, but to really nail the UX of like, how do you manage a lot of channels? We had the side scroll. We moved away from that. We have now the kind of search, the ability to select in the composer, all that good stuff. And so I think where we are now is we kind of had two options. One is I've been saying since the beginning, how do we get this to be permissionless so that if I create a channel and for the developers in the group at the protocol, it's an FIP2 link, how can I surface that within the app of Warpcast? And I think I had said from the beginning, it was like a few weeks away, and I think we've kind of pushed it multiple times. And I think that was a reasonable thing that we could go work on. But I think as we stepped back, it basically was like, we're going to go do a bunch of work at both the protocol and Warpcast to make this work. And I don't actually think we've actually solved for the core thing with channels, in that how do you actually get channels to be both sticky and a sustainable growth path for both the protocol as well as like the channel itself. And so I think where we made the call is if we keep it centralized to Warpcast in terms of like the channels that Warpcast supports today, it's going to allow us to iterate a lot faster and take a few product bets. And so I think our thinking is we're taking the next 6 months and basically chopping it up into 3 2-month like sprints. And the team is really focused on how can we make channels just like 10x in terms of engagement and quality. And so the first one we're doing here for this next kind of 2 months, and really we tried to even compress it even more into 6 weeks, is how do we use channel leads? So this idea that there's kind of someone leading the channel to actually grow the channel. And if that doesn't work, we'll try something else. And if that doesn't work, we'll try something else and then probably step back. But if channel leads does work to the degree that we think it is, then I think that there's like a path to getting to permissionless channels in 2024, early 2024, where the stuff that we've learned from channel leads, we can actually incorporate into like an FIP for the protocol and start to think about like how do you actually decentralize the kind of like leadership and or decision-making for channels, whether that's in an individual or a group of individuals or kind of an on-chain group. I think that flexibility is earned if we are able to figure out the sustainable way to grow channels now.
So speaking of channel leads, can you talk about some of the specific hypotheses that you're trying to test? Is it to find a way to make channels more like a DAO, or it's going to be more like a subreddit? So what specific hypothesis are you trying to test?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, the belief is if you kind of think of the season 1 of Farcaster and Warpcast, it was just kind of one big channel. Like there was a famous, I think Jason might have said it or someone, where it was like, this just feels like one big group chat. And I think that there's some truth to that. And if you were to say like, how did this happen? It's because I and Varun and early members of the community, but it was like kind of like one person just literally doing this for 3 years in a row, trying to just will a community into existence, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this, you need to go 0 to 1, and then once you have 1, you can start to actually scale it, and other people can participate. And so our belief is, if that worked for the kind of omni-channel that is the home feed, can we actually replicate that in a shorter period of time by giving the set of tools and figuring that out? That is, I think, the macro on great things happen as a result of dedicated effort from an individual or a small group of individuals. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the bet. Versus if we just step back, it's like why is Farcaster not growing faster? I suspect that the reason Farcaster is not growing faster is there's not enough content on Farcaster, right? So everything we can do to possibly increase the amount of quality content on Farcaster in a sustainable way that's repeatable is the upstream thing to DAO. And so I think our view is if you can actually supercharge each of these channels in the different interests, you're massively increasing the amount of liquidity on the network, which at that point becomes more and more attractive for other people. And then not only just crypto native people who have kind of been the early crowd of people interested in Farcaster, but you could imagine a world where, as the design channel goes off, you just have people who are interested in design signing up for Farcaster, whether that's Warpcast or a dedicated client for the design channel, and they don't even necessarily know that they're using any crypto. And so I think that is the kind of bet is the fastest way we can actually drive increase in quality content on the network is by making channels great. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the bet with leads is like if you give someone like at Coinbase we used to have this concept which is not invented at Coinbase but pretty popular is like a DRI, directly responsible individual. So if you have one person who's like thinking about making this thing grow, you're probably going to get a better result versus trying to create it as like a collective community effort where you have less accountability and ownership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one channel has been that has been growing really fast is the Nouns channel. It has really taken off sort of in the past 2 weeks, basically.
Yep.
But historically, it has been hard for us to bring sort of any existing large crypto communities to Farcaster, right? But this time it has been pretty successful. So what do you think has changed? And do you think it's like a repeatable playbook that we can use to bring other communities to Farcaster?
Well, Nouns is a little interesting in that they have two things. One, they had their fork, which I think that there was a moment for that on-chain group. I hate using
Mm-hmm.
the term DAO, like it just feels too technical. So it's just like a group of people who are kind of like connected on chain, or
Sure.
I don't know, it's maybe clunky. We need a better word. Anyways, the thing though that I think is important is I actually offered to a couple of folks in the Nouns group the ability to be the lead. They gave me very, what I would say, nounish feedback in the sense that it's like one of the reasons they shut down the Discord is the mod or lead of the Discord was too powerful and that was against the ethos. So we've actually explicitly not put a lead in for Nouns. I can imagine a world where once we've iterated our way through this lead concept, you go from leads to a small group to eventually just like a pure kind of decentralized on-chain organization. Then the DAO actually is the one that's managing the channel. So there is no like actual one person. So I think that channel is going to be a kind of like almost like control, where it's like, here's a channel that doesn't have a lead, but actually has energy. Does that outperform, or can we grow the channel without a lead just as well, just by doing a bunch of other things? And so I think in terms of like repeatability of that, it's like, okay, obviously any organization of people on chain that is going through kind of like a big event that they are like maybe would want to actually kind of congregate on Farcaster, I think we can go after them. I think we have this feature that we built with Warpcast where we can just take an arbitrary set of crypto addresses or an NFT contract and then basically give them a free sign up and then pay for their first year of Farcaster to the protocol on their behalf. So I would imagine that we're going to continue to have that, and I'm going to be thinking about like what on-chain groups can we bring into the protocol later. I think that the biggest thing I would say for on-chain groups is one, if we actually figure out whether it's with Nouns or the channel lead experiment, like something that really clicks from a group standpoint. So whether that's features or kind of like how to use a channel, I think that will actually be the best marketing because people look. The reason everyone uses a Discord in crypto is because there was a project at the beginning that used the Discord. And actually, I'm old enough in crypto that people used to use Slack. So it's like at some point, Discord was where the evolutionary fit was. And then all the projects later just been like, oh, well, any successful project uses a Discord, so we're going to go use a Discord. So it's actually about getting the success cases, and then that actually I think can propagate. And I think that the last thing, and I've mentioned this before, and one of the reasons I'm really excited that you're working on, AlphaCaster now called Abura, but the idea is that I actually think specific clients focused on on-chain groups um, may be the actual big unlock here, because I don't think Warpcast is going to get into that feature set. It's just like too specific.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there may be actually a market there. And I think, like, whether it's a Bora on mobile or Farcord, which is a recent one from Pedro, that makes the kind of a channel look like Discord. I think that the iteration for how do you actually take a group and offer them a UI that is built on top of a set of decentralized primitives, right? Like, first you start with Farcaster, then you start with like that channels, like channels themselves can be tied to an NFT contract. And I think, again, if we nail the channels primitive as a way for growth, we will spend more time in figuring out how to more deeply integrate it into the Farcaster protocol. And then there's probably an on-chain primitive that's kind of like the config file almost for a group that could live on chain and then again be owned in a decentralized way, in a way that like Warpcast is not managing it centrally.
Mm-hmm. But before I go to the next question, I just want to say that there was a bug for the chat. I just did something on the back end, and now you can send a chat. That's actually going to be a reply on Farcaster. And then moving on to the next topic, actually is related to that. That is, I think it's quite impressive to see you try different things before landing on channels. I remember like you explored different things, right? Like DAO proposal notifications, and you were trying different ways to get invites to the right people. So can you talk a bit about sort of how you navigated through the idea maze and what you've learned along the way? I think that's also going to be like good advice for builders on Farcaster in general.
Yeah, so I think one of the things you were thinking about is like groups is the kind of thing which kind of was even before the existence of channels. And I think one of the things I noticed was Purple, and I think for us, April, May, and even early June were somewhat slow. Like we were kind of having a steadily declining number of DAO in Warpcast, which obviously the same was reflected in the protocol. And I think where we kind of said, like, hey, okay, where can we double down on the people who are most active? And if you actually just looked at the people who owned a Purple NFT, they were consistently people who are kind of like 7 out of 7 day DAO, like very engaged in Farcaster, definitely, checking it multiple times a day. And so I was saying, okay, well, what can we do if these people are already engaged? Like, can we offer them stuff? And I was also looking at the fact that Purple didn't have a ton of engagement, and like they had over 100 people on Warpcast with an NFT, but they were getting 13 votes. And so we've said, hey, we can actually do a quick kind of notification in app. Didn't even do a push notification, just did it in app with your standard notification feed, and we saw that like participation rate jumped significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So we at the time we were pretty excited about that, and then I think where we kind of got to is actually there aren't that many other engaged communities. Purple is a very rare DAO outside of like Nouns that is actually still active. Even like little Nouns and NARS, which I think are actually really interesting kind of Nounish forks. They just we're in a bear market, so you have very few engaged communities online, and so I think Nouns obviously is the most prominent, but I think Purple is one of the few. And so I think we tacked a little bit more towards saying like, okay, what can we do to increase the number of on-chain groups and channels in this kind of first version is, if you think about it, a lot of these channels that we've started, we just put a rudimentary NFT, I put it in Zora, did some Midjourney art, and boom, now we have an on-chain representation of a group. Not even every user has the NFT. Like we allow the kind of off-chain following just within Warpcast, and we'll figure out how to get that in the protocol at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think where we are, the protocol is about to be permissionless, and the single biggest thing that we can be doing as the core team Warpcast working on both our app and then the actual protocol is how do we increase DAO? Because DAO is actually what, and I'd be curious from your perspective as a developer on Farcaster, the single most important thing for anyone developing an app on Farcaster, whether it's they just want usage or they want to go raise a venture round, is DAO growth. And I think there's a fallacy and tendency for crypto protocols to nerd out about all the improvements they're doing at the protocol level. and kind of saying, hey, look at all these new features that we added at the protocol level, when the reality is the developer is saying, well, those features are nice, but what I really want are DAO, because that's actually how I build my business. And if you look at the most successful platform for building software in the last decade, iOS,
Mm-hmm.
Apple provides all the users, right? By definition, if I get the phone, even if I don't download a single app, I am now a potential user for a developer, right? And so I think from our point of view, this is like why we are so focused on driving DAO and Warpcast. And people are always like, "Oh, add better GIF support or video," and it's like it's not going to. It's going to be a bunch of work, and it's not going to materially change DAO. We're going to make a couple of existing users a little happier, but that actually is not. That's not what we're trying to solve for. It's like we want to keep people at a certain level of happiness, which is probably where it is today. Always good to be increasing a little bit, but really trying to think, like, how can we 10x or 100x the number of people we can actually just make happy? And so getting to a place where the protocol is 100x, 1000x as large as it is today over the next year, 18 months, I think that's the top priority.
Yeah, and as a developer, builder on the ecosystem myself, like I'd say that like daily active users, like I think they're probably the most important metrics that I'm looking at, for my own application, right? Because we're not charging DAOs or charging communities or users anything at this moment. So if Farcaster could become a distribution channel for us, then obviously I'm going to prioritize Farcaster over any other platform. So I think that logic makes sense, and especially earlier this year when the growth was not perfect. Some people were not happy, right? And you could see that people started to see it as a zero-sum game. But once the growth is back, I think like the vibe is getting better. And speaking of growth, I'm actually curious about your outlook of the next several years after we go permissionless. Because today we're at 20,000. We just need to add a few more zeros before we can hit 1 billion users, right? So looking at the big picture of Farcaster growth strategy, and understand that we've already talked about channels, what are some of the growth levers that you think we can pull in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think retention is the most important thing to focus on, because I think we'll have plenty of additional signups. I mean, I think we may end up pricing the signup fee for the first year of Farcaster at the beginning a little higher, just so we don't get overrun with spam.
Mm-hmm.
But if the wait list is any indication, there are hundreds of thousands of airdrop farmer addresses that are going to be willing to try to claim something on Farcaster or potentially even pay the fee. So it's like spam that pays you, which, like, great. But I think the focus is none of those vanity metrics matter. The only thing that matters is retained quality daily active users, which, like, that's actually like a really, really hard number to move. And we're talking in the single digit thousands every day for both the protocol and or Warpcast. And so getting to a place where that is 100x, like, don't even focus on 100. We got to get to 10x of what we are now and then 10x it again. So
Yeah.
I think I've brought this up before. It's just like, always don't focus on the 1000x. Like, that's just fantasy. Focus on how do you 10x. And if you can 10x, then okay, new level unlocked, do the next 10x. And so I think, where do we go from single digit thousands of the protocol as DAO that are non-airdrop farmers to tens of thousands? I think our bet is, if we can make channels great, like, it's going to enable each one of those channels to be its own growth engine. And it kind of starts the seed of potentially surface area for app developers, right? I think Jason also brought up a good point, which I've been thinking about for a while, is community-specific clients. You could imagine a client that is built for the soccer channel or the F1 channel or the design channel or whatever, that actually has a bunch of tailored features to that channel and may even have some stuff that's not on protocol, right? It's just like adding, you're like watching a football game and it's giving you live scores, and like, it just, like, the client is really great, and it can actually attract people who are just specifically interested in that interest. It's a world where, if Reddit was more API oriented and said that every subreddit should be especially every subreddit that has 1 million people following it should be a $10 million a year EBITDA business. Like, that is the mentality that I think channels, if it works, gets us to. And then you're going to get in a world where you have permissionless channels. You'll have n number of channels. I think Reddit has 2.8 million subreddits, 130,000 of those are active, so it's a 5% hit rate. So
Hmm.
like the hubris to think that like Warpcast would be able to come up with like all the right channels, that's completely wrong. And so in our view is like figure out the primitive, like really iterate as much as we can centralized, and then encode that primitive into the protocol for a decentralized,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Uh, so to just be conscious of time, I want to touch on the payment that the payment features that you just announced today. And also this is related to Dylan's question in the chat. That is, I feel like that has basically redefined what a wallet is, because Farcaster and Webcast app today is a non-custodial wallet, and now you have added traditional payments on top. So do you think that Webcast is going to support sort of any type of on-chain transaction directly in the app, but via traditional payment method?
I think we're going to be focused on Farcaster because the whole point is if we can get Farcaster to work, it just creates a great flywheel for not only Warpcast, but also every single app in the ecosystem, right? It's like a completely aligned set of incentives. So I think where we're really focused is do not ever make the assumption that someone has crypto or even that like, oh, well, it's only 2 steps to get some crypto. And we've had this point of view, I think embedded wallets have become kind of trendy recently. Like, cool, we were doing embedded wallets since 2020, and I had everyone in crypto when I started onboarding them in 2021 tell me it was a stupid idea, just use sign in with Ethereum. And then it like turns out it's like, actually, if you're trying to build an app that has really good onboarding, you should never make the assumption, especially on mobile, that the user has a wallet, because it just a bunch of people already don't have wallets, and then more importantly, if you've ever tried to do the deep linking between a mobile app and a crypto or Ethereum wallet, it's really janky, and that's not even
Yeah.
the crypto wallet's fault. It's just this is Apple's fault. So in that world, just saying you have the ability to do on-chain transactions on behalf of the user, have an opinionated point of view, and then in our case, because now we're on an L2, we can actually say, hey, a lot of these actions are just gas only, right? Like adding a signer or removing a signer, doing a recovery. Those are all just basically gas only, however much gas it is. And so for us, it's just like, okay, let's just make this a super simple experience. Every time you do an on-chain action, you don't have to be thinking about like, what is the tax implication of this? Like, it's kind of silly to think like if you were to add an app in the Farcaster ecosystem, if you do that with Ethereum and you're following US tax law, like you actually have to do like a tax accounting of that app install. And it's just silly. And
Hmm.
I think Zora, if anyone, has proven that like people are very happy paying a fee, right? Like, people doing on-chain actions are happy paying a fee. They don't like paying um, gas itself is actually kind of this like free shipping component where it's just like just bundle it in. It's like, here's a fee, just do this, and then we solve this for you. You don't have to like worry about this like complex power user interface of like, how fast should I be paying this and whatever. And so in our case, we take the fiat from you from the in-app payment, and then Warpcast does the payment on your behalf. And this also goes into the philosophy of like, we built the protocol while also thinking through it from a client standpoint. So the fact that a third party, if you do an EIP 712 signature, can pay for your transaction on your behalf,
Hmm.
that only happens in a world where you actually thought from the end user experience at the beginning and then worked your way back to the protocol. This is where I just strongly disagree with like the protocol kind of like tries to invent it and the developer then adopts it, because I actually think like if you're just not obsessed with the end user experience of every screen, you're just gonna your protocol is just not going to be serving the right UX of how things should be.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand we're at time.
Yeah, I have
So
a few more minutes. We can
okay,
go till
good,
1:30.
fantastic. Okay, fantastic. So because I do want to ask about the Apple tax, 30%. Are you passing that directly to the users?
So we're charging 99 cents to a user.
Hmm.
The gas is probably lower than that, so I mean it's going to vary, and we pay the 30% tax. So Warpcats gets a little fee, and we should probably just make this clearer with the learn more of like how that breaks down. But my POV is if you don't like that, you can use another client, you can use Cast Storage, or you can directly interact with it on Etherscan. And so I think like our view is just like build the Apple tax into your cost structure. There are plenty of industries in the world where a 30% cost of goods sold like that is still a really good margin. And
Mm-hmm.
so in our POV is like, pay Apple, pay the chain, and then whatever is left is your revenue. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think like that is a model that I wouldn't be surprised if other people, especially in a world with L2s, start doing, because I think in a world where only thing that crypto is about trading, 30% is untenable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't trade Ethereum with a 30% tax. You can't trade a monkey JPEG for $50,000 with a 30% tax. But if the whole goal is to do an on-chain action to manage your Farcaster account, or to mint an open edition that's free, you can do that with a 30% tax. That's like, it's not that expensive. And something I think Varun and I both have a POV on from Coinbase is convenience trumps cheap every single time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the reveal preference for people is they just want it to be simple, and they don't want to have to think like, any additional complexity. They're willing to trade a little bit higher fees. Very, very few people actually care about the fees, and those people are going to go find other clients. They're going to go find the power user tools that they can just interact with the contract directly. And then the beautiful part is if you pay for storage outside of Warpcast and you show up to use Warpcast, you inherit the storage. So like the beauty of abstracting away the Farcaster actual account at the blockchain level means you as the user have maximum control over which one you use to manage. And that's fine. We're fine with that. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the average user who doesn't want to be bothered with any of that stuff, they're going to be very happy to pay the kind of like full freight of, again, Apple, blockchain, and then whatever Warpcast is charging on top of that.
Mm-hmm. And as far as I understand, like this is probably the first crypto app that allows users to pay gas through Apple in-app purchase, right? I don't think there's anyone else that has done.
I have yet to see one. I'm sure someone will dig something up where someone tried it at some point. But
Yeah.
I've had this point of view, Varun and I've had this point of view for a very long time. Since I've been at Coinbase, it's just like make the simplest app and people will pay. Because I think that the reveal preference from watching people at Coinbase in 2016, a lot of people don't know this. We used to charge 1%. We increased prices in August of 2016 in the depths of the bear market. Mark Andreessen was the one that gave Brian the advice.
Mm-hmm.
We went into 2017, the year where the company did 100x on every metric, with the fact that we had doubled prices going into that market. And so I think like, and then everyone in that year was like, oh, Robinhood's coming in for free, Cash App's coming in for free, Coinbase is going to lose all this market share. Didn't happen. Why? Because once people are signed up for something, they care about the convenience, and they care about the brand and the trust and the fact that they've done the work to KYC with Coinbase. Most people don't shop around. They like, once they find a brand they like, they're willing to pay it. It's this whole Apple thing too. But so you have
Mm-hmm.
all the nerds who are like, oh, well, Apple's overcharging you for this and this and this and this. And the other person, it's kind of like the midwit meme where it's like, Apple is good. Like, Apple just works. Like, I don't have time to deal with like, figuring out like how to gas optimize this. I'm willing to just pay that convenience over cheap.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that is a sort of repeatable playbook for other crypto apps? Because as I understand it, the way it works is because the forecaster contract is designed to allow a third party to pay after the user signs, right? So it doesn't work for any type of contracts. Is that
Right.
correct?
So my sense is that consumer-minded projects will think about designing their contracts like this, because
Mm-hmm.
and not every situation is going to work like this, but I think that the world is moving in a direction of users will not pay for things on chain directly. They will pay a fee in fiat for whatever they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be use cases where people do stuff on chain, like for sure, like directly. And over time, it might get there. But in a world where most consumers are spending most of their time on their phone, you have to play by the set of rules that Apple has on the field. You can't just like grumble about like what it is. And the reality is in-app payments work really, really freaking well for people who have an iPhone. Every single person who has an iPhone has to have a valid payment method. You cannot even download a free app without it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the game. And so we're willing to play that game with the tax. And so this is my point of view is like, if you don't want to do that, go do a PWA. And if you've built PWAs, there's a whole bunch of complexity that comes with the PWA, because frankly, Apple is never going to support that to the
Yeah,
same level of UX and polish that they do their native apps. You can
100%.
complain about that, but that's just the reality. And so I think basically anytime people are complaining about Apple, it's Cope. It's just like build for what the set of rules are, and just like your users will use apps that are well built that follow the convenient set of patterns set up by the App Store as it is. And if you
Yeah.
don't like any of it, go use Android, right? And it's like okay. So
Yeah, I mean, that's why we need like East OS, right? But that led me to, to think about sort of the Farcaster developer or Farcaster client ecosystem in general. That is, after Webcast, introduces the payment system, most other clients are going to be more reliant on Webcast, because they can simplify the UX, right? So how do you think about sort of reducing the ecosystem's reliance on Webcast as we evolve?
So I disagree with that. I
Mm-hmm.
think like cast storage is the revealed preference of the beauty of the system that we built. I am not. I won't buy any more storage with Warpcast in the sense that I might test it once. I bought my 10 units with cast storage, and I told cast storage you should add a fee for this because you're adding something valuable to the system. So the fact that there can be an alternative that someone can go build and say, hey, if you don't want to be as reliant on Warpcast, don't do this. And then I think Warpcast's value proposition is if we go spend a ton of time and effort 10xing or 100xing the total number of daily active users for the protocol, I think most app developers are going to be pretty happy with that in a world where they know that if they get that relationship directly with the user, they get that signer, that's sovereign. Warpcast can't mess with that. It is a user-controlled action to remove it. And so I think like I can fall into the same trap of thinking it's like, oh, well, this is ideologically pure as it could be, or like, what is
Yeah.
reliance? And the reality is like, what people care about are like, if you can 100x the number of quality daily active users of people using the protocol, it vastly improves the business dynamic for anyone wanting to build a business on top of the protocol. And so I think it's just like we should just be relentless in doing that, and live up to the actions. Like we said, we were going to get the network to permissionless. We're on the verge of doing that. Hubs work, like, we're continuing to iterate on those. The ability for you to be able to buy storage outside of the app works completely fine. And so I think it's like, as long as those tenets exist, then I think people should be okay. It's the same reason as like Coinbase, right? It's like Coinbase is a net positive of the ecosystem, even if they have 100 million people and people are paying a 2%, fee. And it's like, if you can convince people to go to your cheaper service or your better service, great. But I think overall, like the inflow of people and money into crypto as a result of Coinbase is a massive surplus for everybody else.
Yeah, I do have some questions regarding builders and sort of client ecosystem, but I don't know if you can keep going. If you have to go, just
I got to bounce now, but I think we should just try to do this again. Maybe we can do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And until then, see you on Farcaster.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye. All right, thank you, everybody. I'm going to process the recording and I'll upload the recording later today. Thank you very much, and enjoy your weekend.